Okay, so we're going to start with the next installment of the ERC educational series, and we've got a really good one today. The last one that we had was very popular. We had Aron Yagoda come on. Aron has been not only around the racetrack for many, many years, but also he's been a horse owner. He's probably done several things, right, Aron, throughout the
Yeah, I
industry.
tried.
Yeah, exactly. So he knows the sport backwards and forwards. He knows all the ins and outs. And last time we had him on, he was talking to us about bills. We had gone through some invoices, some training bills. And I know because I got a lot of emails after the fact, some people were surprised. And they, again, you would be surprised because it's not something that we deal with every day, most of us. So we thought it was a great idea to bring Aron back. And have him go over some more of the fundamentals of racing, like going over the condition book and just all those good things that we just assume is happening behind the scenes, but we don't really know if we're not involved in it. So, Aron, thank you so much for coming on with us. Again, it's always a pleasure to have you on.
I love the club. It's very good. Unfortunately, we had I guess we might as well start with the bad news, and with 5-alarm Robin passing away last week. That was a first for me. I've owned over between I owned my 600th horse in 2017. So I don't know, she's probably in the mid 60s, the mid 600s somewhere. I count every couple of years. And that is the first one that I ever had die on the racetrack. I've had horses pass from colic. I've had horses pass from infection, from fevers, from all different kinds of things. But that is, I got horses that got hit by lightning in a field in Ocala one day. I lost 5 horses at one time in one field. That was very devastating for me too. But this is the first time I ever had one that got passed away on the racetrack. She wasn't even destroyed. She was dead, but by the time they hit the ground, they said she had a massive heart attack. Similar to like some people that have a heart attack, they drive themselves to the hospital and say, "I'm not feeling well," and they make it to the hospital. And then there's people that just sitting at the next table for you have a heart attack and they can't revive them. And unfortunately, she was like that. She was very sound. She had no physical issues. She was 6, which isn't a very old age. Unfortunately, she's going for a necropsy, which is a horsey autopsy up at Cornell. They take her up there, and I will definitely be transparent and pass along anything. I did go through her vet bills. She didn't receive anything that was out of the ordinary. She breezed on Lasix that day, but she's raced on Lasix her whole life, and she only had very little Lasix in her system. I think she was 3 or 4 cc's of Lasix for the breeze, and that was the only medication she got. Unfortunately, Julio Pazua, who came to this country in the 80s from Peru, and rode here through around the early 2000s, was her exercise boy. He's 64 years old, I believe. And he was very badly injured in the spill. When he was on the racetrack, he was having trouble having feeling from the waist down, and he did feel his arms. They took him to Winthrop Hospital. I went to visit him. He had 2 or 3 fractures in his neck that they repaired, and he has one in his lower back that they're not concerned about, or they don't feel that that's causing any of the paralysis. They had that surgery on Sunday, and I went to see him on Monday, or is it Tuesday? Well, Monday, I think I went to see him on Monday, and he was in great spirits. We all should be in such great spirits after. I said, Julio, I'm really sorry. I feel really bad. And he said, "Oh, Poppy, it's okay. It's part of the business." So I would have been cursing the darkness, and this guy just had the greatest attitude. I'm going to start a GoFundMe, which I know Shane and a few other people have reached out. I did want to clear it with his family first, just because some people have a lot of pride, and I didn't really know what to put in his little bio. So my daughter's going to help me post it, and they were giving me, Linda's office was going to help me with his bio. Other than I know that he rode over 12,000 races, and that must mean that he's ridden over 100,000 horses in his life. And unfortunately, his career might have come to an end on my horse. So I feel bad for 5-alarm Robin. It was very sad. And I hopefully Julio can make a somewhat of a good recovery. So after the surgery, he was able to move his legs when I went to see, not his legs, but he was wiggling his toes, and I touched his legs and he felt that, but he was having trouble with his arms the other day. They weren't moving. He just sat there in a full body thing. And but he did have good spirits. So let's send our prayers, and hopefully when the swelling subsides, they said they would know the extent of his damage, but he will need a lot of recovery. I went to the racetrack today, met with the benevolence people. They are going to chip in and make sure that he gets his mortgage paid or his rent. We don't really know. His wife's not really forthcoming with her English, so it was a little hard to understand her. But anyway, I made sure we got him at least $5,000 that are going to go towards benevolence to keep him going. And if he needs more than that, they said I could appeal to a higher thing. We also have jockey compensation insurance, which we pay, which is something that we talked about at the last call, which is something that comes out of our racetrack expenses. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
That comes out of that. So that covers the jockeys and all the exercise riders. Linda also has, covered him on workers' comp. And if he has a permanent disability, we do have the PDJF, which is the Permanent Disabled Jockey Fund, that would kick in and help him get accustomed to, hopefully not have to get him accustomed to his new way of life. So.
Aron, thank you for all that information, actually, and definitely when you get that information, when you do have that GoFundMe page, if you want, you and I can speak offline. I can even do the bio for you as well, if you want me to just write out his bio. But really, guys, this is an unfortunate part of the sport, and as Aron said, who's had many horses over the years, like these things you can never really. Do they happen? Yes, but they're not really common. It's not something like an everyday occurrence that you would see. And it's just really unfortunate. And so we do feel terrible. All of us, Aron, I've heard from many of the members, they've reached out to me to reach out to you to basically send their condolences. So everybody obviously is with you on this, but it's
well, it was our horse. It's all of our horse too. So we all felt the pain. I had a bad visual of seeing her passed away in front of me. So they gave me a hard time about taking a picture, which I didn't take because they're worried about people posting it. But anyway, and if I could just get back about horses with cardiac issues.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's similar to a person. Many times when you see a horse that will have a cardiac issue in a race or something, or in a thing, they'll slow down. They're almost like they're bleeding. The jockey will feel that this horse is not putting forth an effort. They'll pull the horse up and the horse will go down kind of slowly, and then sometimes they try to revive them. We can't do mouth to mouth on a horse, so you'll see compressions on their belly and stuff like that to try to keep their heart going. And most of the time they will expire, but it's a lot more peaceful. They, not like what happened to Five Alarm Robin is not the norm. They usually just have a cardiac issue like a person and says, I'm not feeling good, let me sit down, and they'll go down slowly. The jockey will jump off and the horse just goes down quietly.
Yeah, and I would also think, hence also the jockeys, the riders' injuries too, because he really, as Linda had pointed out to us, she had sent us a comment on it that he didn't expect it either. Because
right, he didn't brace for it. Usually they brace for it. They know something's coming, and in this case, that wasn't the issue.
Okay, I don't know if anybody has any questions. And again, as we move along, if anybody has a question for Aron about anything that we're talking about today, please feel free to just let us know, to notify us, so we can pass it on to Aron. But Aron, if it's we can talk about.
I know Shane has a question. He
Shane,
texted me.
Yes, Shane. Yes, please.
Thanks. Hey, Aron, I'm just curious about horse race insurance as far as the horse. When does it make sense to get insurance for a racehorse?
Right. So the horses at different stages of their life, you could insure them at different rates. So actually, John Green came on, and we could put him on the spot to answer this. Me personally, I don't really insure any of my horses unless the ones I was pinhooking, if they were financed at the bank, they needed to be insured. Because if I had to finance them, if someone else had the papers, which happens a lot in pinhooking, and usually I won't insure a good horse at the racetrack unless they're worth maybe 100,000 or 250. It doesn't really pay at the racetrack. At a racing rate is usually between 6 and 7%. A pinhooking rate, we would pinhook, John and I and Mr. Green, we would pay around 3%, a little less, give or take whatever the year was. And that's really not it. We didn't really keep the horse a year. So we'd only keep the horse from September till February, March. So we would get a rebate on the rate. Once we sold the horse, we would cancel the insurance. And also at the sales, sometimes you're allowed to buy fall of the hammer insurance. Fall of the hammer means when that hammer hits and that's your horse, if that horse should walk out of the ring and keel over or hurt somebody, you're insured. So with the racehorses at 6 or 7%, that's a big expense considering all the other expenses we have. So, I've had over 600 horses in my day. If I would have insured them all, that would be a huge thing. So I kind of self-insure. In this case, Five Alarm Robin wasn't worth 100,000. So I lost all that money plus all the expenses. But that doesn't make up for the death of an animal, but that's the instance. John, if you could chip in and say when you guys insure or not, because you guys play at a much higher level and at all levels. You can also insure babies inside the mare. If you have a mommy horse, a pregnant mare, and you spend 40,000 on that stud fee, you can insure the in utero, they call it the in utero foal, that you're insuring that baby inside that mother's belly, so that you have insurance the minute that horse hits the ground. John, can you jump in?
Yeah, we only insure the horses that are worth above deductible. So Aron, you hit the nail on the head as far as all the different options for insurance. We do something that's a little bit of a difference. It's a little variation because, like Aron, we can't insure every horse. So we put together a pool of horses that we want to insure, and the insurance company comes back to us and says, based on this risk group, based on the ages and the type of horses they are and where they're going to be stable, and there's half a dozen variables that are in play, they come back to us with a rate. And then based on that rate, we can say, okay, if I'm making up a number, but let's say it's 4% to insure everything. If we're willing to self-insure and have a deductible of 100,000, how much will that lower the rate? And then we kind of go back and forth with the insurance company based on how much we're willing to take on as our own risk, and also how much we want to insure overall. And then we balance it out with what the overall rate is.
And to add one more thing with the claiming horses, say 5 Alarm Robin was insured for $100,000 if I bought her for 100,000 and I ran her for 25,000 claiming. The minute she runs for that 25,000 claiming, the insurance drops to that last rate. They'll send me a rebate on the differential. So a lot of times it doesn't really pay to insure your claiming horses. So you can't go insure a claiming horse for $1 million and run it for 25, and then you automatically goes to that. And that, I mean, John and the DJ don't really play in the claiming level, but that's also a differential that happens with claiming horses. Is it correct, John?
That's 100% correct. And one more thing, and then we can move forward. As a business, we also have key life insurance on Aron Yagoda. So if anything ever happens to Aron, then we'll cry, of course, at his funeral, but we'll also run to the bank with the check.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
That's a vote of
As long as you
confidence.
cry first.
Mm-hmm. That was a great question, Shane. Very good question. Okay, so let's get started. Aron, we've got you here. You and I were talking the other day about a variety of things, and of course we'll start with I think it was with the condition book that you wanted to start with. Meanwhile, I don't know if you want to set us up, Aron, and in the meantime, I'm gonna try to get it up on screen, the index as we're
Okay,
speaking.
so I was talking to Christina, and she said last time with the bills and everything was very being transparent. It really woke a lot of people. Everyone hears about the bills, but when you see it, it's a big difference. One of the things that she has a lot of questions about is, when's this horse running, or when's this horse running? It also happens to me. I go to my mailbox and I get a thing about, oh, call me on May 1st and I'll give you a winner. We don't know what horses are running on May 1st. We know that the first Saturday in May is the Kentucky Derby, and that race is definitely going to go. But I thought a good way to cover is how we go about selecting a race for a horse. So right now, Christina's showing an index. So let's use as an example, if we could use the horse that we have left, which is from me, is Freedom of the Press. Freedom of the Press broke her maiden last time in her last start as a 3-year-old filly. She's now 4, and she won for maiden 40,000. So if you scroll down, this is an index. This index is in the front of the condition book. So if you go up a little bit, it says index, go down, go up.
Yeah, there.
All right, stop there. See, it says index of races, filly 3-year-olds. Now we can't look at any of those because she's no longer 3. So we would scroll down to the next where it says filly 3-year-olds and up. And we could look at all the different conditions that will be in the condition book.
Yeah, this is what comes up.
Okay, you can leave it at that. Fillies
you
and
wanna-
mares 4 and up.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
if you look at that, we said, okay, these are all the different kind of conditions and when these races are in the book. So we are eligible to run Freedom of the Press for 40,000 non-winners of 2. She can't run in a maiden. Once you break your maiden, you can't go back. So we could run her in 40,000 non-winners of 2. There isn't any 40,000 non-winners of 2. But if you look at the third line down, now it's the first line, the third line down where it says starter 50. You see what STR 50,000? That's a starter claiming race. And the dates for one of them was April 16th, and the little T is T for turf. So if you can go to the condition book to April 16th, Is that possible?
Yep.
Yeah, scroll down to April 16th. And we'll talk about what the conditions are for that day.
Hold on, let me get to April
Okay.
16th. We're getting there, guys.
Okay.
Okay, there we
There
are.
it is.
Okay.
There's So April 16th, see the first race in the book is for 3-year-olds and up. Wait, let me take out I need my glasses. For 3-year-olds and up, those are boys, 12.5 claiming 1 mile and an eighth. And the second race is New York bred maiden claiming. So if we go to the 5th race down, the race 5, now that's just what they call the race 5 in the book. Just leave it where it is. And that's for fillies and mares, 3 and up, which Freedom of the Press is, which have started for a claiming price of 50,000 or less, which she has. She ran for 40 and has never won a race other than maiden or claiming. So she was allowed to win a maiden race and another claiming race, but she wouldn't be eligible to run it. If she would have won an allowance race, she wouldn't be eligible. So she fits the condition of this race. She's not eligible to be claimed. And we believe, Linda and I thought that this is a good place for her to get started for her career, for a campaign for her 4-year-old career. So that race, that's also 6 furlongs on the outer turf. So that's the proposed race. So if you go up a little, go down a little bit. And we'll show you, no, the other way up, I meant, sorry. If you look at the top of the day for the Saturday, April 16th, right under that, it says entry close Wednesday, April 13th. So next Wednesday, we're going to enter Freedom of the Press to hopefully run on April 16th in race 5 in the book. That might not be the race 5 that goes for the day. So what happens is Linda will call up and say, I'd like to enter Freedom of the Press, race 5 in the starter allowance race. And sometimes they ask for what the weights will be because there's conditions, like since she's older, she's going to have to start with 126 pounds. And it says non-winners of a race since October 1st, but she won a race after October 1st. So she's not going to get any weight allowance. So she'd have to run with 126 pounds. So and Linda will enter. She'll say that I want to name Jose Lascano, which hopefully by now she's already reached out to Jose Lascano's agent and got a commitment from him since he won on the filly last time. And when you call the jock's agent, it's a verbal commitment. You say, I'd like to ride Freedom of the Press. He says, well, I might be riding one for Todd Pletcher in there. I like that horse better. Or I might be riding for Eddie Barker and I like your horse better. Let me call and get off that one. So you kind of have a verbal commitment. But at the draw, sometimes you get spun. The jockey agent says, oh, last minute Chad Brown put one in. I'd rather ride for Chad Brown than for you. And then we're out hustling for a jockey who's around then. So that's something that can happen. So once we enter in race 5, a couple of hours after we enter, around 11, 12 o'clock, the racing office, can you put out the call sheet?
Yes, the call sheet, the tweet,
Yeah, the tweet.
Yeah. Let me see if I can find it. There it is. Mhm.
Okay, so this is just a typical day that I took a snapshot and sent it to Christina. And on this day, I don't know what day this is. This is for April 7th. Earlier in the day, they said, looking to call a final for Thursday. There's still light in races S1, S2, and X4. And then about an hour or so later, they said the final for Thursday, April 7th would be the 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, sub 1, sub 2, and extra 5. So those are the races they're going to use for the card. So if we would have entered in race 5 for the day, they don't use race 5. They'll either put that race on again in another day or so as an extra, and we'd have to re-enter, or we'd have to wait and look for another race. And that's where people need to understand is just because we enter doesn't mean that that race is going to go.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the S1 and S2 is in the condition book. If you go back to the condition book and scroll down, every day after the last race, see the 10th race, and they have sub 1 and sub 2. So those are in the book. They prefer to use the first 10 because that's the race, the ones they like to use. When they can't get the first 10 filled, then they'll try to take entries on sub 1 and sub 2. There's also something called extras. Every day, when the overnight comes out for the following day, the racing office will see some races that might not have gone the day before or the day after, or might have got rained off the grass and they never used it, or they can hustle another horse. They'll put on extras, which is a last minute addition to the condition book. And if you go to the overnight, I'll show you what extras are.
Mm-hmm.
And extras, you have to be ready to enter. You only have like 1 day's notice for these extras where the book comes out. If you scroll down, this is just an overnight. Scroll down towards the bottom. right after the last race. Stop right there.
Yeah.
See, it says extra 1, extra 2, extra 3, extra 4. These are last minute races that the racing office puts on. So for that day, for September 16th, for April 16th, we're going to have the races in the book, then the substitute races in order of preference, and then the extra races. And hopefully they're going to use our race, extra 5. Now, race number 5 in the book. If there's rain in the forecast and they think they're going to do that, they might say, you know what, we might put that on for Sunday the 17th. But we'll know April 13th in the afternoon or sometime in the morning if they're going to use the race. I'll let Christina know. And then from there, hopefully the race doesn't overfill, which is more than, I think on the grass course going 6 furlongs, they only allow 8 horses, 8 or 10. I don't remember what it is on the outer grass course. So you have to be one of those lucky enough to draw in from the 10, and that's how horses land up on the also eligible list. So I found a little video.
Mhm.
Can you play that video of
Yeah.
what it looks like, how they assign post positions once your horse is entered?
Can you see it? Can you guys see it?
I still see the overnight.
Yeah, I don't know if I can actually play this. It's up on my part, but I don't know if you guys can actually see this. I'm going to try and see if you guys can see it.
Well, anyway, so what happens is, say there's 12 horses in the race and they're only going to allow 10. They put
So you can't see it. Okay. I don't think you guys can see what I'm seeing. Okay.
Okay. So anyway, some of them that you guys have been there with the claim sheet, you've seen it before.
And guys, actually, I sent it, Aaron, I sent it to you guys. I sent you a link. If it was the video that you watched that was in the email that I sent, that was the email. That's the video that Aaron's referring to. I sent it to all of you with our email, just an FYI.
So what they do is they put the little sheet. Each horse has a little sheet. They put it upside down in a box, so backwards, so the person can't see it. And then they'll draw a pill. They'll pull freedom of the press. They draw a pill. They said up number 11. So now we're going to be on the also eligible list. And then they try to make the race go from there. And that's how they draw a card. And once they finish that, then the regular overnight comes out. From the overnight becomes the program, becomes the racing form, and then becomes the day's races. So a lot goes into making sure you find the right race for your horse. Then you got to get lucky enough for the race to go. And then you got to get lucky enough to draw into the race. And then you have to have weather, and with turf horses, weather becomes a factor. And then you have to be lucky enough to get into the race. And then if you scroll up, sorry. That's what an overnight will look like before it becomes a program that we get when we come into the track.
So Aaron, when are you going to get this? So the race draws on, they have to
draw. We're going to know. We're going to enter Wednesday the 13th at around 10 or 11. They're going to send out a thing, hopefully, that they're going to be using race number 5.
Yeah.
And then they'll say the draw will be today at 2:00, and they'll draw the races at 2:00. And the overnight, after they proof it for mistakes or just make sure the weight's correct and all that, they'll come out around 3 or 4 o'clock. But we will know. If you look at another thing to point out, and we're going to turn to John in a second, he just doesn't know it yet, is say you look at the first race. One of the things that they have in New York and some other racetracks is preference. So if you see the first race for maiden 3-year-olds and up, they have a little date, E331, 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 E408, like the 4 horse. They want horses that haven't had a chance to run yet to get in before horses that have run. So in this case, the race didn't overfill. But in races that do overfill, they prefer horses that have a further date out. So if you ran last week and someone hasn't run in 2 weeks, if you both enter, that horse will get pulled into the race before you will. But that only really applies to races that overfill. If you also look down, like in the second race, you'll see the 5 horse has MTO. That's a main track only entry, and they'll accept that horse as a main track only because this is a grass race. So if it comes off, that horse, they want to make sure they have horses that stay in the track. If the race stays on the grass, that horse becomes an automatic scratch. He can't stay in the race because he entered for that specific main track only. If freedom of the press is entered, we're not going to enter her turf only. We're just going to enter her. If it comes off the grass, we could then decide, hey, let's try her on the dirt or not. We're not forced to scratch. They actually prefer if you stay in the race because they don't want these races to fall apart to a 4-horse field. I don't mind running in a 4-horse field. The racetrack doesn't like putting on 4-horse races.
Mhm.
And that's basically how that becomes. So in the 6th race that day, whatever day that was, all those MTOs, they were all going to get in if it came off the grass for the overnight that I sent. And since they canceled grass racing that day, if you look up the chart, they all probably ran.
Mhm. So Aaron, I have a question for you. If you look at that sixth race, we've got, you were just talking about that E here. I have the cursor hovering there. So the 04, so I guess that's an April 8th. What is that? If all the rest of them are from the third, they last ran on the 31st, is that what it means?
These were last entered on the 31st. They
were
they
last
have
entered.
different ones. Yeah, right. You'll see sometimes like in Saratoga when it becomes more of an issue. And so in the wintertime, we really don't have this issue because there's not a lot of horses on the grounds and most races are going with short fields and they run a lot more on the dirt. But in Saratoga, guys will enter right back. Sometimes you'll see R. That means the horse just raced, but they go by the preference of the date. So if this race was to overfill, that horse with the 4-8, he would have been the first one on the also eligible list.
Got you. Okay. Okay, that makes sense.
So that,
Does anybody have any questions? Because there's a lot of information here. Hold on a second. I can't really see.
but that's how the whole game works, and that's how they draw a card.
Okay. Ashok, did I see you put up your hand? You have
Yeah.
something to ask?
So, Aaron, what makes a race not happen? Is that the number of entries, or?
Yeah, sometimes a number of entries. Some racing secretaries will look at the 5-day forward. Now they put out the book a long time ago, right? So they're looking, they say, oh, we're going to have a lot of rain. And sometimes they'll say, well, you know, the races are filling and we have 6 grass races going. We don't want to run 6 grass races that day. We have 2 courses, but the racetrack can't handle 6 grass races. So they'll say, you know, let's put on this one or this one. But a lot of times it's the field size. Races that do always go would be the Kentucky Derby. So, you know, the Kentucky Derby is going to fill if there's 1 horse in it. The other races are all not guaranteed. There was a stake race this past winter, the Heavenly Prize. They put it on twice, and once it was in the book, it didn't go. They put it on as an extra. They couldn't fill it, and then they finally filled it a week or 2 later, and they were calling everybody that had a filly, please just run in the race. You won't even have to pay to run. It was a stake race where usually you have to put up an entry and a nomination, where in regular overnight races we don't have to. They were waiving people's entries and nominations just to go in the race, just so they can make the race go. They don't really want to cancel any stake races.
Mhm.
And what is the magic number?
The
Or is it
race-
different at
the
different
race-
courses?
Well, different times. In the wintertime, they'd be happy to always have 8 in a race. But if you notice when you turn on Aqueduct, sometimes it's 5 to start the race, right? They don't want to
Right.
start with 5 if there's a scratch, a sick, or something like that. But usually they'd like to have at least a field of 8. For the last race, when they used to run triples and stuff like that, they'd like to have a full 12 horses. So if you notice, a lot of times, you know, the 12th race might be maiden claiming New York breds with a full field of 12,
Yeah.
but that race wasn't number 9 in the book. That just became race 9. It might have been race 3 in the book. So when you enter, you say entering race 3, but they might become race 9. Once they figure out what races they're going to use that day, Ash, they then determine the order, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Like once
actually,
I had to go somewhere and I called up, I said, listen, if my race goes, can you make it early? I have plans. And they said, no.
Got it.
I like that you asked them. That was very
Yeah,
sporting of you.
hey, listen, if you don't ask,
gotta
you
take-
don't get.
You got to take a shot. Yeah, that was actually, that's good. I'm glad you said that, Aaron, because I was just about to say that, because you'll see a lot of times with the stakes, especially, sometimes once in a while you'll see like a four horse race, and they'll move it out of, let's say, the pick 3, the pick 4, you know, the pick 6, like the Rainbow Six in Lake Florida or wherever else it is. You'll see them, they move it because they don't want it, you know, they don't want a 4-horse field part of.
Right. And they also like the stake race to be later in the day, but tomorrow, like this, the Wood Memorial is at 4:55 or 4 something. And they said that the reason why they put it at that time is because it's going to be on national TV. And that was a slot they got. They preferred to have run the Wood Memorial at 5:30 or something, but then it only would have been on Fox. And since they're under contractual things with the Santa Anita Derby and whatever else is happening tomorrow, they moved the Wood Memorial to 4:55. So there's a lot behind the scenes, but once they could draw a race, you know, that's the way it is. Sometimes they'll draw, if they really look, and if they think there's going to be rain late in the day, they might move the turf races to the early races. But once the overnight's drawn, they don't move it around.
Okay.
I hope that answered.
Aaron, can you explain something to us? So I just saw an article about the turf course. Let's have a talk about the turf course in New York. You and I have discussed it. You know, we talk about the condition, obviously the weather. It's quite different in New York than it is in Florida at this time of year. And I saw that they also had covered it. They actually covered the turf course. Can you explain to us? I mean, I don't know if you know, I'm sure you know, but I don't know how many of the details you know. Can you explain to us a little bit what the story is with the turf course in New York?
Yeah, so at Aqueduct, NYRA, the NYRA circuit, we're the only circuit that has 2 turf courses at every track. Aqueduct has 2 turf courses, Belmont has 2 turf courses, Saratoga has two turf courses. One's called the inner, the outer, some they call the Widener at Belmont, that's just the outer one, the other one's the inner. In Saratoga, it's the same thing, they call the inner, and then they have the outer. And this year, I think it's for the first time, they to try to get the turf ready earlier, Glenn Kozak, who's our track superintendent in NYRA, who does a great job. He has the hardest job at the racetrack. He seems to be in charge of everything. He bought what they call turf blankets. And these were, he said they were blankets that covered the turf course and let air and some water through to keep the grass course kind of growing a little faster as opposed to that. He thinks that because of that, the grass was a lot higher. They actually had to cut the grass to start the grass season this year, where usually they're starting at a very low. Gulfstream has a lot of problems with their grass course, and that's why they put in the Tapeta course to try to do that, because grass doesn't grow year round in Florida. In New York, we used to have 2 grass courses at Aqueduct, and then when they put the inner dirt course in at Aqueduct in the 1976, they put the inner dirt track in for winter racing. They got rid of the outer grass course. Last year, or 2 years ago now, when they got rid of the 3 years ago now, when they got rid of the outer turf course, they put it back to a turf course. So now we have 2 turf courses. And what they did with that is they wanted more people to try to come back from Florida sooner so they can get bigger cards. So right now we're going to go to Belmont April 29th, and today is April 8th, and they haven't run a grass race yet. Grass racing was supposed to start this past Thursday. It got rained off Thursday, it got rained off today. They're probably going to use the grass tomorrow. And I mean, how many chances are they going to have to run on the grass in the next 2 weeks when they're only running 4 days a week? So they spent a lot of money just to try to get more grass horses here for what, 2 weeks? But the real reason why they did that is when eventually, I mean, on the QT, eventually they're going to get rid of Aqueduct. And we're going to have to, when they rebuild Belmont, when they're rebuilding Belmont, we're going to have to stay at Aqueduct for a very long extended period of time. So there'll be 1 year where we don't go to Belmont at all in the spring. And when they're going to rebuild it, eventually, not for a while, they haven't started rebuilding it or anything like that. And that's why they put the 2 turf courses in, so that Aqueduct can be Belmont for a while. And it's happened before. I have wind pictures from my grandfather in the 1940s and 1950s, and it said like Jamaica at Aqueduct. And you see that sometimes in California, and Christina would know, it says Oak Tree Meeting at Santa Anita. These are old racetracks. At Calder, they used to have the Tropical Park Meeting, which was a racetrack that closed at Calder. So that's something we're going to have to go to eventually. We're going to be at Aqueduct for a very long time 1 year. They'll either have to lengthen Saratoga or spend at Aqueduct while they rebuild Belmont.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that's why they get.
It's funny you said that, because I had written a story about the Belmont Stakes, and if you go back over 100 years, or like 100 years ago, you'll find that the Belmont had been run at different tracks. It was run, I think it was at Jerome Park. It had been run, like, so there were a variety of different places that it had been run at, not just the Belmont or Belmont Park. So that was interesting. So that's a really good point, and that's a good tidbit as well. Does anybody else have
they're still very far away from the Belmont being torn down. I mean, that's what they're liking to do. They're trying to sell some bonds and to tear Belmont down and make it smaller, because Belmont, eventually we're not going to have Aqueduct, and it'll be just Belmont all year and Saratoga for the summer, which is kind of a shame.
And also now that they have the stadium too, right? They have the stadium, and
the stadium. Yep.
Yeah. So
we talked about that on a call yesterday. We were on a call yesterday. When we come back from Belmont in the fall, we're going to have some overlapping with the Islanders and who gets the parking lot. That's going to be a nightmare.
Well, and
just for a few games.
Well, and I think that's going to be, that's something that all the members that, we're going to have to talk about when we have we're going in for horses when they're running in New York. It's going to be a consideration, just so people are aware now that it's not going to be the way it was. Now, like, there's going to be some level of overlap at some point. So, but anyways, I will let you guys know as we go along, and as we talk about that. Does anybody else have a question?
Oh, John, did you want to add anything, John? He's still there?
I think he's still there. Yeah, if
I
we,
might have-
no, and I think, I think just for the entry, I think one thing I was saying to Aaron the other day that sometimes, and I know I've discussed this with John too before, sometimes, and every trainer does it differently. I know Aaron can weigh in and maybe John can weigh in as well, but trainers in terms of entering, sometimes it's a very, I don't want to say last minute, because sometimes they have an idea that they may want to enter on a particular day, but sometimes it comes down to a couple of different factors that it almost makes it like a last minute decision. And I think sometimes people think that I'm just trying to keep things that I'm not trying to tell you, or I don't know. But the reality is sometimes the decision comes very, very late. Like I know I just spoke to Christophe Clement just the other day. I was up at Payson to go see Community Adjusted, and he was saying, we had a couple of spots. We were thinking maybe we'd run her at Gulfstream. That race was a little too short, so that wasn't our first choice. Then we were thinking we're going to take her to New York, but New York is at the end of the month, and once we go to New York, we're not leaving New York. We're staying in New York. So then he was saying, the ideal situation comes up a good time on the calendar. It seems it's a good distance, is the race at Keeneland. So they're going to ship her to Keeneland. She's probably going to run in that particular race, which is the second week of April. Then she'll go to New York. So a lot of times there's a lot of logistics that go into where, what a horse is going to do. And sometimes that changes based on, Aaron, I mean, you can weigh in on this. Sometimes things just happen with horses that really throw you off your game plan, right?
Sometimes it happens the same day. I remember I had a filly decorator, Jen. I entered her for 25,000 one day, and the race wasn't going. And they said, "Oh, if you put her in the allowance race, the New York bred allowance race, we'll let it go with 6." So I said, "Well, I really want to run for 25,000." They said, "Well, it's not really a tough race with the 6. Why don't you just enter? And if you don't like it, we'll let you out." So I put the horse in, and she landed up winning the allowance race. So I got a $74,000 pot instead of a $40,000 pot. And it was just because I was just helping the racing office out. And then the next time I put her in for 25,000 and they claimed her, and she didn't win either. So
I don't know. As Shane, do you have something that you wanted to ask?
Yeah, I want to ask, so with all these races that you have the potential for, how much is it your decision versus the trainer's decision, and when does that communication start?
a lot of times, I mean, I happen to have a good rapport with my trainers, so we discuss it. With freedom of the press, there's only so many different options. A horse like Proven Strategies, which is the club's signature banner boy, he's won a bunch of races. He has a lot of different options now. He can't run in certain spots. He can't run in non-winners of 1. He can't run in non-winners of 2. So John Green's faced with the point of, do I run him in a high price claimer? Do I run him in an easier stake race? He's in a lot of different spots. With freedom of the press, she's kind of going through the motions. You go to first grade, then you go to second grade, then you go to third grade. And once you become a professional like Proven Strategies, then there's a lot of guesswork, and you have to shop other tracks around as well. But I have a good rapport with my trainers. Actually, I could tell you a funny story. My trainer in Maryland for a long time was King Leatherbury, who's I think the 3rd all-time leading trainer in history of racing, and he's the funniest guy. And maybe we can get him on one day. He's a hysterical guy. And I was entering a horse in Maryland, and I said, "What race are we going to go in?" "I don't know. I'm between 2 races. I want to enter the easier one." I said, "Well, how are you going to know which one the easier one is?" He goes, "To tell you the truth, I really don't know which one's going to be easier, but I'm going to enter the one with the lower purse because that's got to be easier." And I said, "Please don't tell me that's your system for the Hall of Fame." And that's what that was his system. He goes, "I can't really tell which race is going to be easier, but the one with the lower purse has to have worse horses. So let's go in that one." And that's a guy who's won over 6,000 races. And I hung up the phone. I'm like, maybe I should get out of this game.
Well, something you were saying earlier, Aaron, that I wanted to ask you. You were talking about the jockeys and being spun by the agents, and we've actually had a jockey, we've had an agent on before, and I remember that I had asked this question, but I'm going to ask you this question from your experience. When you see a particular jockey land on a particular horse, and mostly you'll see it in the better races, like it'll be in the stakes races, the graded stakes races. You'll see a jockey that, let's say John Velasquez, he was riding horse A last time, he shows up in another race, he's also been riding this other horse, and he opts for one horse or the other, meaning he does not ride the horse that he rode last time, and he goes with somebody else. Do you think that is all the time by design, or do you think it's like it's not coincidence, but it's just like the circumstances played out that way. How much should we read into it as handicappers? Like, oh, look, Johnny V rode 2 of these horses and he opted for A.
Right, like we're gonna get spun a lot of times when we think we have a jock, Jose Ortiz for once, right? I'm friendly with Jose, I go to his house, I hang out with him. But then if Chad Brown enters the race, all of a sudden he's not my friend anymore. So he's gonna say, listen, I'm not gonna care about winning the starter allowance on your horse when I'm gonna ride, 25 other horses. So Johnny Velasquez, for instance, he's been riding a lot for Bob Baffert. He'll ride anything Bob Baffert to ask him to go on, versus even if he just won on someone's allowance horse and say, listen, I'm sorry, I have a bigger commitment with Bob Baffert. So a lot of times they stay with the outfit that gives them a lot of mounts. They don't really change for one race here and there. And I give you a funny story. When I was in college, Mike Gonzalez, who's a jocks agent who's been ruled off, but he was actually a very nice guy. He was a leading rider in Florida. We became best friends, and I used to stay at his house after I graduated. I'd go down to Florida and I would always ride for him. Well, one day I flew down, my horse was running the next day, and his agent spun me. So that night I'm in his house and he says, brother, I'm very upset with you that I rode your horse last time and I'm not riding your horse this time. I said, you should ask your agent. So we called his agent, and his agent said, yeah, I think we have a better shot. And he was really upset. He goes, I'm close. I don't really care about winning one race. And then the race ran and his horse happened to be backing up. And my horse actually came up the rail and won with a different jockey. And then that night we were having dinner. Well, I was eating and he was watching me eat. That's jockey dinner for you. We were having dinner. He says, my horse was tiring. And I looked to the right and I looked to the left and I saw the purple and white silks coming up to the inside. So I made sure I tired to the outside. So not that he didn't try to win on his horse, but he definitely, he made it easier for my horse to come up the rail.
Yeah, he zigged rather than zagged.
Yeah, he zagged, right.
Yeah. So I guess I'm not sure if anybody else has another question they want to ask before we, because I wanted to segue just a little bit. We've got a couple of minutes left, Aron, before we let you go. But we were talking, you mentioned obviously the claiming races, and I've heard from several of the members who have been more and more interested in the claiming races and getting involved, because obviously there's that element of instant action. You claim a horse, the horse is ready to run. Obviously, there are the advantages and the disadvantages to dealing with the claiming races. But maybe you could just kind of give us a quick summary or just a quick overview in general. What is your process when you're going to go claim a horse? What is your process? What do you try to do? And how do you try to, how do you, first of all, find a horse that you want to claim? And how do you go about it? How do you go about that process?
So me personally, I don't know what a lot of other people do. I know Linda, she's always claiming it. Today she claimed a horse. She claimed the horse back that won the 5th race. I think she claimed number 5, which was a horse she had before. She claimed it back. So me personally, I only start with fillies, and I have a filter system that I use, kind of like if you buy a mutual fund that only buys certain types. So I have a system that I go through, and I'm pretty rigorous about that. So when I get up in the middle of the night, I look for horses that could run a certain numbers at certain. So I start with the thoroughgraph, then I'll run a pedigree, then I'll watch videos, and then I want to see what kind of races that she needs to run. If she wins this race and goes out of that condition, what she needs to run the next condition. So I don't care if the horse wins the non-winners of 2 today and only could run a 60 buyer or a 12 on the thoroughgraph. If I know the next spot she needs to run a 70 and a 10 and she's never run that before, if I don't think she's improving, I don't go after those types. So for me, it's the numbers. I try to figure out what the horse needs to do in order to win the next condition. So throughout the year, I track it. In allowance race in the wintertime, you could win with a 70 buyer and a 12 or a 10 on the thoroughgraph sheets. That same race in Saratoga, you have to run maybe with an 80 buyer and a 8 to 10 on the thoroughgraph sheets. So if I can't have a horse that can't run 12s, I'm not going to put that horse thinking that I'm going to run in the allowance race. But I will give you a quick story. Yesterday, Linda won the 2nd race with Waters of Marone, and she claimed that horse the week before for 40,000. The racing office hustled her into the race. They called up and said, we need another horse. So she said, I'll put it in. And then she landed up winning the race yesterday, and she was going to run the horse back for the 40,000. And she landed up winning the optional 80 claiming yesterday. So they will surprise you at times.
Like sometimes that works out. And also,
right, like Decorator Jen with the allowance race versus the claiming race that day. I ended up winning a bigger purse just because the other race didn't go and she was ready to run.
How often does that work out for you in terms of, because you use that term obviously several times now, you get hustled into a race because they need to obviously fill those races, right? So does it usually work to your advantage, or are you really resistant to get put into a spot that you don't like, you know what I mean? Does it really work to your
Yeah.
advantage because the races, maybe there just aren't enough horses in the race?
So sometimes I want to know how tough the race is going to be. You're not allowed to ask, you're not allowed to get that information, but there's another way to do it. So I start with like whoever the leading rider is, even though if I don't have any chance to ride him. So I'll call up IRAD's agent, Steve Rushing, and say, listen, I want to run my horse in this race. Oh, I'm riding so-and-so in this race. So I write down who's riding, right? And then I call Jose's agent. I'm like, can Jose ride this race? Who you got? I tell him my horse. He goes, no, I'm riding a better one. I said, which one? He tells me the name. I write that one down. And then I get like the top 3 or 4 of the agents. I'm like, oh, this race is going to be too tough. Let me go look somewhere else.
Yeah. Okay. That's a way to do it. You see, those are some of the tricks, everybody. Those are some of the tricks.
Another trick I used to do, if you want to win, like a lot of times when the condition book comes out, when you see the Todd Fletchers and the Chad Browns, why they win on Saturdays so much is that they point for those races when the condition book comes out. So the maiden special that's for next Saturday, they might be pointing a horse to. Very rarely do they go into the extras. So I like to, if I had a horse that's kind of not as great as them, I know that they're pointing like on Derby Day and all those races in those books, they try to make those races go. And they're pointing all their killers that day because the owners are there for them and it's a big day and they need to showcase their stable. I'd rather run in the maiden special extra on Wednesday that no one's pointing for, that just came up at the last minute. You'll catch a weaker field at times.
That's an excellent point. That's a great
So I
point.
try to go where no one, I kind of use the Woody Stevens analogy, keep yourself in the best of company and your horses in the worst of company.
That's a good, yes, that's very appropriate. And also, so Christophe Clement said something the other day, we were just talking, randomly about stuff, but we were saying, I had mentioned that, we had been considering maybe, getting into the claiming aspect and claiming a few horses. And he made a comment about, oh, you're going to really want to claim horses now because at the you notice at the end of the meet, at the beginning and the end of the meets, people tend to get a lot more aggressive. People start, basically dropping horses in for a tag that maybe otherwise wouldn't, because they want the wins. I would assume. What do you have to say about that, Aron? Do you notice a certain time at the beginning of a meet or an end of a meet or a certain time of year that you notice people are like those claiming operations are more active?
Yeah, actually, usually when something ends, like in Canada, they stop racing in December and they don't start again until April. And a lot of those people can't afford to go to the South. They don't have another home and all that. So when the meet's starting to come to an end in Canada, they don't want to feed those horses all winter. They drop them aggressively to win. So you'll get a horse that's running for 20. They said, let me just win a race and get it claimed and I'll have money for the winter. So in New York, it's year round. So right now, you'll have people right now until Saratoga opens for training. Everyone just got their stall letter, right? So Linda just got assigned 50 horses. Well, Linda has 64 horses on the grounds right now, and she has no place to put those other 14, right? So I said, my horse isn't going anywhere. She needs to run some horses aggressively because they're not going to run certain type of cheaper horses later on in the meet when the grass races start and all that. So you have to look and they'll run their horses aggressively to move them on. Okay. Because they need room. They also, a lot of trainers have 2-year-olds coming in. The owners want to get their 2-year-olds in. And if you're a trainer that has 22-year-olds coming in and the owner, you keep telling the owner, I don't have room, they'll find the trainer that does have room. So they'll get rid of something that does that. A lot of times they'll be aggressive by, it just happens that they'll end up with $35,000 older male claimers that go sprinting, right? So you can't run all 5. You got to get aggressive. So you have to put 1 in for 25. You might put 2 in at 35 and you might put 1 in at 50 that's doing better. And you'll probably win the race with the 25, but you're going to lose the horse in the claiming race. So it's a lot of chess, but the claiming game it's a lot safer now than it was because we have the right of returning if the horse is lame after the race. And there's no guarantee that when you buy one as a yearling or as a 2-year-old, that horse is going to get to the races either. If you notice, a lot of times horses are just starting. There was a horse that started his career today, Goldquist, that Linda loved last year at the 2-year-old sale by Nyquist that sold for $310,000, and the horse just made his debut today. So he sold last May, and it's almost 11 months later that it took this horse to get to the races. All right, even if there were just little hiccups along the way. At 11 months of feeding that horse at $4,000 a month, that owner now has another $40,000 into that horse.
Well, and you
So-
guys have seen the bills now. You've seen some
Yeah.
bills, so you know that, it's still, that all adds up by the end of the season or within a year, certainly. So definitely. And then I think that is the advantage, obviously, of the claiming races, and it also keeps it honest, because just the fact that somebody can claim it away from you, Aaron, as you know, that keeps people a little bit more honest, right? Don't you think? In terms of
I've lost a few that went on and did really well. Last year, the year before, I lost Honor Way. She won her allowance race in New York. I took her to this Phasic Tipton sale. I couldn't get 80,000 for her. I put her right back in for 60,000. She got claimed. And then she ended up winning a stake or two. And she ended up even being graded stakes. And when they went to sell her, they only got 115,000 for her. I thought they were going to get a lot more, but she didn't have much of a pedigree. So, that's all they got. So you have to take those chances. But if you constantly run your horses over their heads, one, you'll be very disappointed that you don't win. And two, eventually the horse gives up and says, every time I'm out here, I don't do well. They might not know if they win the photo, but they know that they've run well. They know when they've done something good. When a horse wins, you'll see that I get a lot of confidence. Not if they're second by a nose. They don't know if they don't look at the board and say, I lost a photo. But if you constantly run them over the heads, it's kind of like if you kept playing against better people. If you don't get better, you're just gonna get disgruntled. And that's what happens with horses. They get sour. They don't like losing. Some of them don't care. They never win. But the ones that do care will get their heart broken.
Well, we had a lot of information here. I don't know if anybody has is there another question? Does anybody have anything else they want to add or say? Again, we have this month I'm going to be putting out in the next couple of days. I just want to get a better idea. I want to see who enters. Aaron mentioned Wednesday is going to be the day that Freedom of the Press, she will be entering. I think probably next week as well. If Community Adjusted she runs, she's also going to be entered next week as well. And then on the 30th of April, we have Proven Strategies. He's going to be running in the Elusive Quality. So that's going to be pretty exciting. And again, I saw the little guy. He's just, he's really funny. He's very cute, and he loves his peppermints and he loves his people. So he's just a really sweet horse. So we're going to probably have to figure out and make a plan to go and meet up with him when we, either when he gets up to New York or into Saratoga. He's at Belmont or Saratoga. So I don't know if anybody else has any questions. Otherwise, I'm just going to let you guys go. And as I said, I'll put out sometime this week, depending on when they enter. Latest Wednesday, I'll put out an update, team update, just to give everybody a better idea what's going on, who's entering and who's running where. But hopefully we'll be seeing Freedom of the Press running next weekend or at the end of the week. So that'll be fun. But Aaron, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you, guys. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Have a
Aaron.
great-
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Bye.
Okay,
Thank
thanks
you.
everybody. Have a good
Bye.
one. And if you need anything, just let me know. Give us a call or send me an email.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.